wondering that. What was the origin of that story?
Okay, so I thought about this, and it was at some point in my modeling career, in my music career, I was a singer and a songwriter, and I guess I still am. And it's one of those things where you're kind of like, yeah, that's who you are forever. But somewhere along the way, somebody started calling me Jen with a G. And next thing I know, my bank is cashing checks made out to me as GIN. And I'm just like, okay, fuck it. Like, this is this is my alter ego.
Fuck it, we ballin'. This is what we're gonna do.
Right. Right.
Oh, well, Dr. Jennifer Jen Cooley, welcome to Secure Out Podcast. Thank you for being here today. You have quite the life journey, and man, I just want you to take us along. Let's start it off where it all began. Like, where did things kick off for young Jen?
Young Jen. Ooh, young Jen was so I was born and raised in Northwest Tennessee. I had very humble beginnings. I was raised up in Buchanan, Tennessee, which is like an unincorporated part of Henry County,
Okay.
in the woods. So, yeah, that's where I grew up. I went to college when I was 16 at Murray State.
Oh, wow.
Um, yep. So I grew up about 30 minutes south of Murray, Kentucky. And then at that point, I knew that I had a genetic build of a runway model. I mean, it really wasn't rocket science. I was 5'10" and a size 0. And
Genetically engineered for this
I was,
profession.
yeah. And so I was like, fuck, I need to be doing this. Like, why am I not doing this? Like, I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
So I jumped on the first, so I was on my way to school. I was on my way to Murray State, and I had a full cast on my left arm. Long story, but I'd broken my elbow. And I was listening to the radio because that's what we did back then. And
In the 1900s.
in the 1900s, we listened to the radio, and there was an ad on there about a modeling competition in Clarksville, Tennessee, called Pro Scout. And so I pulled over and I wrote it down on a piece of paper. And I went to it with the cast on my arm. And they just give you like this little up and down, like, 30-second interview. And they're like, yeah, you're in, jump on board. We have the convention is in Memphis at the Peabody, and, this is your official invite. So by that time, the cast was off. I ended up getting more callbacks that day than anybody in the history of that competition. So there were agencies there, modeling agencies there from New York, from all over North America, like Chicago, New York, LA, Miami, all the big ones. And so I ended up signing a contract with BMG Chicago. And of course, hailing from the middle of nowhere, my mother, I mean, God bless her, she just like, I don't know how she dealt with me. She was just like, okay, like, I guess this is what we're doing. Like, we had no guidance. I ended up signing with BMG Chicago. They told me that I was too commercial to work the international market.
What does that even mean?
So I didn't have like high fashion editorial. I didn't have that look. That's what they told me. So they wanted me to work like just the American market in Chicago, like the commercial catalog market. But the whole time I was talking to this guy named JJ Cortez, who's no longer with us. And he was just a free agent who was really well known in the industry out of New York City. And he was like, that's bullshit. Like, I can get you on a plane to Singapore in 3 months and with like zero experience. And so we ended up dropping BMG, and I went with him, and I was literally on a plane during the SARS epidemic.
Oh, no.
On my way to Singapore at 17 by myself. And it was the best thing ever. Like, I fucking loved it. And I think I arrived on a Friday. And so I remember this vividly. I got there on a Friday. I was picked up by one of the guys from the agency. He took me to my apartment, the model's apartment. There was a girl there from Hong Kong named Percy. And my first casting, like we had a fax machine back then, and that's where our agent would send us like a long, a list of you have to be here, 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 and here for your castings. I had no idea what a casting was. And fortunately, in Singapore, English is one of their main languages. Most people there
Mhm.
speak English, but also if they don't, they probably speak Mandarin. And so I ended up hailing a taxi, and my taxi driver did not speak English, and he spoke Mandarin. So I had the address written down in Mandarin. I just showed him a picture.
Nice.
On the way there, I started getting this cramp, this wild cramp in my abdomen, and it got worse and worse. I started getting sweaty and lightheaded. And next thing I know, like I walk into this casting that I'd never been on before, and I am just like doubled over in like
Shit.
pain, like crying on the floor. And so I had to leave. Uh, and this was Monday morning. At this point, it was
Oh,
Monday.
geez.
I hadn't even been to my agency yet. I hadn't met my agents at all. It was Elite Model Management in Singapore. That's who so that my mother agent was JJ, and then my sister agent was Elite.
Mhm.
Um, so I had to get another taxi, and I'm in this country, and I'm 17, and I'm in fucking pain, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And I get another taxi. He doesn't speak English either. So I show him the address, and he takes me there, and I get out of the cab, and I'm just like crying. There's snot on my face. And um, this guy downstairs, like on Orchard Road, owned a jewelry store, and he came out, and he was just like, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on?" And I'm like, "I need to get here." And I was like trying to show him where I needed to go. And so I go upstairs to my agency, and the first, like, I remember walking or actually kind of crawling in the front door, just like hysterical. And they all jumped up, and they're like, "Oh my God." But when I first got there, when I, they took me straight to the emergency room, and that's where they got their first look at me in person. But when I first got there, one of my neighbors was this older British guy, and he goes, "Oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about SARS. Just stay out of the hospital."
Yeah.
And so the first place I end up is the hospital.
Yep.
Which it all ended up, it worked out fine. I had kidney stones.
Oh no, I was just gonna say.
Yeah, it was kidney stones. Like what? That was, yeah, the most random thing that could have possibly happened. That happened to me. Yes.
Dude,
And so
and that is like a pain that you when you see it on somebody. And shout out to Tony D. He's the first one I ever saw with kidney stones. My man was doubled over, and he was on death's door. And I mean, hospital ride, emergency room, everything. We're sitting there for hours trying to figure out what's wrong, and like people are like telling us 5 different things, and we're like, oh my god, like this dude's gonna die. One doctor walks in, looks at him, reads the chart, it's like, yeah, kidney stones.
hmm I've given birth all naturally to a 10-pound baby, and it's very similar as far as pain. Yeah, it's something to behold. So that kicked off my modeling career internationally, and I ended up doing really well in Singapore. It was a little secret, a little industry secret back then. It may still be because all the print was in English. So in the high fashion world, if you have like, a really good magazine like Harper's Bazaar or Marie Claire, and it's in English, like they think that's like, they don't know where it's from. It could be from Canada, it could be from North America, it could be New York. So I built a really good book out the gate. Um, and so then I went from Singapore to New York City. I signed with Supreme, which was the babyface division of women. At that time, they were the number 2 agency in the world. And then I was sent all over the world. I was in Italy off and on for 2 years. I loved the European market. Um, I worked in China, which was a nightmare. Um, it was terrible. It was illegal. Everything in China is illegal.
Oh
So,
man.
and that's how they get you with communism. So I remember being in China. I got there. It was actually, I think, yeah, I was 18. Um,
Holy shit. That's gotta be scary for anybody. But
oh
for
my
an
God.
18-year-old model going to
Oh, yeah.
China.
Well, and I flew in. I remember flying there. I was in Hong Kong. I was in Taiwan first, which was great. Taiwan was great. Um, totally different market though. They treated the models like shit. And this was back
Mm,
in the early 2000s when models were like dying from anorexia.
yeah.
Nobody gave, yeah, nobody cared about like, you know, like body shaming was not a thing back then. Like
Oh
they
yeah.
literally, they were so cutthroat and ruthless. If you had any fat on your body, like they would send you home or threaten you. And,
Yeah, that you had to
is
be what's the name? Carry on Moss. What was the name of that popular
Kate
model?
Moss.
Kate Moss. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that was the industry standard, and she weighed all of like what, like 50
Just the
pounds.
heroin chic. But again, we were teenage girls. We weren't
Yeah,
women. And so it was easy for us, but that's a whole other issue where women are looking at these publications and comparing their bodies to teenage girls with makeup on. Like you
yeah.
can't, there's no comparison. So yeah, I worked that for a while, for about 4 years. And I did well. I got to see the world. It was a really cool experience. It was a dream of mine that I checked off the list. And then at one point it did not really make me happy. I remember being really depressed in Italy, um, just super down. I mean, it was it was a lot of pressure. People weren't just dying from anorexia, they were killing themselves.
Yeah.
Models were killing themselves like left and right. Um,
It's like
so
the big misconception. People think like you have all the money, all the luxury in the world, like you should be completely happy. But oftentimes we look at people in this world, and you're right, like a lot of them are killing themselves. They're not only the pressure to maintain a certain size or image, but then the lifestyle. Like when you were living that, like what were some of the things that you saw as like a reoccurring theme amongst your peers in that life? Like was it like a lot of abuse of drugs, a lot of just you know just reckless abandonment, and just not having like anything tangible to really like define as like, wow, this keep me grounded and happy.
So on the international scale back then, um, I had roommate. I remember I had a roommate that was 13 from Brazil,
What?
um, and she didn't speak English, and she was in Singapore with me. And I remember her just crying at night. And we didn't have a luxurious apartment. They would stick us in these apartments with bunk beds and put like 10 of us in there. And we had a very luxurious and glamorous nightlife. We had promoters that would come pick us up and take us to the most beautiful restaurants and bars and clubs to decorate to
Mm-hmm.
be, to decorate
Yeah.
and to make things look more attractive and appealing so that they could get customers. But we did not really have a glamorous day-to-day life. We were very young, we had no idea how to manage money. I had no idea how to, I was negotiating international contracts at 17, 18 years old. And I did not, I mean, and I got fucked on, I remember after I left China, like I got fucked out of $20,000 and my plane was about to leave and I was cashing out and I'm 18 years old. And they just looked at me like, what are you going to do about it? And and there was nothing I could do about it. I had to get on the plane and go home with no money. And so the recurring theme is, I think, the abuse of power and manipulating young girls and using them. I mean, we had ridiculous expenses, like our apartment expenses where there were 10 bunk beds and, 10 of us, or 10 beds and 10 of us, we would be charged like 6 grand a month to live there. And we had no idea. Like we didn't know. We didn't really
Yeah.
care. I mean, 13, 14, 15 years old. Like what do you like we had no idea we were getting screwed.
And there's
Um
nobody there advocating for you and protecting you and like saying like, hey, no, this is fucked.
no, especially because we
Wow.
were working in other countries. Um and a lot of these girls, this 13-year-old girl from Brazil was sending money back home to her family.
Mm.
A lot of Eastern European girls, a lot of girls from Russia, like a lot of people from poverty stricken areas that are just, again, kind of, they had a ticket
Yeah.
to get out and they did. But unfortunately, when you're that vulnerable, people do take advantage of you. Photographers try to sleep with you. There is a
Yeah.
lot of drugs. And whatever you want, you can pretty much get. I remember being outside a club one night with my roommate, this French Canadian model. She was very successful, but we drank a lot and she started throwing up. And I remember her saying, "Don't worry, I do this all the time." And I just remember just like being like,
Yeah. It
all
looks all
right.
shiny on the outside. It looks like you're living your dream for anybody that's seen the pictures in the magazine, seeing the ads on TV, but the reality sounds absolutely terrifying for a young girl. Like for anybody would be friggin' scared out of their mind. Show up here, do as you're told, and then, survive. Like how do you make it out of that world?
You know, I loved it. I mean, I'm highlighting on some things that were really negative, but it was so cool. Like back then, it taught me so many life skills. It taught me how to survive. It taught me emotional intelligence. If you're in a country where nobody speaks your language
Yeah.
and you're a kid, I mean, you just, you stick and move. You got to figure it out. So it taught me a lot about myself and just interconnectedness. Like it doesn't matter what country you're from or where you are, like we're all human beings and we all have so much more in common than we think. I learned that very young.
Yeah.
It opened my eyes. It made me more open-minded and appreciative of the United States and everything that we have here and our rights. You go to a place like China, you really appreciate the United States. I learned that very young.
Yeah.
So I got out of it. I kind of just left. I was sick of it. I wanted to, I started very young. I wanted something more. I didn't feel like I was operating. I didn't have the education, that I wanted. I think that contributed to my depression. I was more intelligent and I had more intellectual capacity than my education level. And so I had no outlet. I felt like I was just a mannequin, with no voice and no purpose. So I came back to the US and that was shocking to me. Going back to my little bitty town in the middle of nowhere as this high fashion runway model that had walked for Christian Dior and was in Gucci ads and Louis Vuitton. Like I had nothing in common
Yeah.
with anything that I ever knew. And so that was a pretty harsh reality check, is that I came home, but I really didn't feel like I was at home.
No, you'd lived, you'd seen the world, the broader, like an experience, just like you highlighted, yeah, some horrible things, but you lived, you experienced some great things. And then that's sort of like for a lot of us that get out of our hometowns and experience life outside, you come back and you're like, fuck, everybody here played it safe. And I have no way of relating to you. Like it's that feeling when you're on Facebook and people reach out to you from like where you grew up and you're like, dude, like I am, I don't know how to relate with you. Like I've lived a life. Like I didn't stay home in the cozy little town and just lived. Like I went out and I experienced things.
Right. Yeah. So that was a tough, I think that was the period of my life where I kind of went a little wild. Like I was just trying to find my place.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I can't stay here. So, I'm going to go to Louisiana and try to hang out with my dad that I don't really know that well. That was on the run from the law my whole life. That didn't really turn out well. And so I was just kind of going from place to place, trying to find a new home. And I found myself in
Yeah.
Atlanta, Georgia, randomly. And I lived in hotels and I
Really?
started working at a bar. Yeah, I wasn't going to go home. I didn't want anybody to help me. I
Yeah.
lived in a hotel like south of 20, which is like kind of in the hood. There's
I
like,
know Atlanta
gosh,
very well. I was gonna say, dear God.
I was like, yeah, I remember there being caution tape outside. But I got a job at a bar as like a shot girl, and then I made friends with this girl from Sierra Leone, and I just loved her. And then we became besties, and we got a place together, and then that became the first place that I could really plant my feet as a young lady. I was 19, and I stayed there for about 4 years. And I did some modeling there locally.
Yeah.
And in the US in Atlanta, you don't have to be a size 2. You don't have to get a size 2. Nobody cares. Like there's no pressure. So it was a relief for me. And I just enjoyed my life. So then, at some point I became a mother very young. I was 24 when I had my oldest son. So I wanted to raise my children around my family. So I came back to my little bitty town in Northwest Tennessee, and it was still difficult for me. So I stayed there for maybe a year, and then I ended up moving to Franklin, right outside Nashville. And I'm just
Okay.
at that time, Nashville really was not. It was nowhere what it is today.
Yeah. What time period is this now?
This
Mid
was
2000.
15 years ago.
Yeah.
So Nashville
Yeah.
had just kind of started becoming, a place of interest for people, entertainment industry, people from LA
Hmm.
who are trying to get, tax breaks and,
Yep.
things like that. So we had like music execs and people like that moving out from New York and LA, but it really was kind of still a great place. It kind of still felt like the old Nashville back
Yeah.
then. But at that point I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do here. Like as a model, like what am I
Hmm.
going to do? So I ended up just doing a bunch of music videos, like for, and I didn't know anything about like modern country. I really love outlaw country, but at the time, like I remember I got the lead role in like a Lady Antebellum video.
Oh,
I had
nice.
no idea who Lady Antebellum was. And Jason Aldean, like I didn't know.
Yeah. I know the names. I have no clue about what.
Yeah. So I was just like, I'll just show up. And so I planted my feet there. And and it was a cool experience. I've been raising my kids in this area. But I did everything I could do there.
Yeah.
And at that point, around the same time after I had my first child, I decided to go back to school. Around the same, like 2011. He was 2. And yeah, I got my bachelor's in business because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But then at that point, whenever I started thinking about my master's, you get to decide like what you really want to be
Yeah.
and what you want to focus on. And I've always been fascinated with psychology. Um, I've always had a natural ability to like people just tell me things that I don't even want to know. Like they just feel like they can just tell me
Yeah. They can
their
just be
darkest,
vulnerable. Yeah.
yeah, their darkest secrets. People that I don't even know that well will just fucking tell me the craziest shit. And but so yeah, I knew that I had a natural ability to disarm and to listen and to be empathetic. I'm super empathetic. So I decided to make that my focus, and then I focused on clinical counseling. I got a master's in clinical mental health, and then I'm from the University of Tennessee. And then I took a break for a year. But I knew I wanted to get my doctorate. But I also had another kid at that point. I had 2 kids. I wanted to jump into a clinician role first to
Hmm.
see, before I commit to something like a doctorate, like I really need to make sure this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I ended up working in a medically assisted treatment facility in my hometown. And I didn't see myself landing at a place that treated substance abuse. It was actually not on my radar at all. I actually didn't think I would enjoy it. I come from a family of alcoholics and
Mm.
addicts, and I just never thought that was for me. But it turned out to be something I really loved. And it's funny how that works out.
Yeah.
So I did that for a year. I developed an intensive outpatient program for that part of Tennessee because there were no resources.
Wow.
And we partnered with, I was the only licensed person at that clinic.
No shit.
Um, so they kind of put that on me to do it, and I did. And um, so we were taking people from who are in the court systems who were, incarcerated repeatedly, repeat offenders for drugs. They didn't belong in jail. They needed treatment.
Yeah.
So Tennessee started this, grant funded program where they would pay for these people to get treatment and not go to jail. Our jails were overcrowded with people who had, addiction issues. And that didn't help them. It just made them worse. So that's what I started there.
And what was the success rate of that program?
I left right after it took off. And I knew that like I could not work full time and get my doctorate. So right after the program like kind of took off, I stepped out and started focusing on academia.
Yeah.
So I did not stick around to see the results, but now if you look at what's going on, there's these clinics are everywhere. And they are grant funded. There's so much grant money out there that people don't know about, and it's first come, first serve. And if you just tap into it, like if you don't have insurance, well, this grant is going to pay for you to get treatment.
It's funny you
So
bring that up. I'm looking for a grant writer. So if anybody's listening and you have grant writing experience, hit your boy up because got some big plans. That's not easy work too. It's a lot of hunting and grinding trying to find grant money. Yeah.
So I started going to Western, pursuing a doctorate in applied psychology. And then I started in January 2020.
Oh no.
I know. And then my kids had to be homeschooled for a year. So and then at that point, like Western was about 2 hours away from me. So I was driving to Western like 2 or 3 times a week. And it wasn't feasible. But thankfully, this is the good thing about how we adjusted in 2020 is we started having class online. So it made things easier for me.
Nice.
But I knew that I needed to be like on campus. And so I ended up moving to Bowling Green in 21. And then I ended up dropping the program at Western and started another program online at Cal Southern. Same accreditation, way cheaper.
Nice.
So then I was just like, well, I guess we're just here, So
Yeah.
now we're just Kentuckians. And then, yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it and how I arrived at this place.
Yeah. Yeah. Just following your path. Like it's awesome seeing somebody is just being able to just follow what their like paths ahead of them, like just tell them to do. Like a lot of times we get fixated on this direct route we have to follow, and then we forget to just live a life. Like it's not all about just check marks, and you have to listen and be open to change, man. Like that's, I think a lot of veterans, a lot of us to get out, we're not open to that. We immediately want to go into like, I'm going to go contracting work. I'm going to do this because it's exactly what I used to do. It'll pay me an awesome amount of money to do it. It's like, yeah. Or you could pause, reflect on what you really want to do, what you're excited about, and explore that. Like it's just taking a knee, figuring out what you really enjoy. It's really hard for a lot of people come to find out.
Mm-hmm. It is. You have to be willing to go off the beaten path.
Yes, absolutely.
And you cannot be afraid to fail.
No, the thing that really struck a chord with me when I read and we were engaging and talking is you're serving a population of Americans that is more often, I should say, like there's no sympathy, and there's a lot of polarizing views on how you should support these individuals and the resources they should be met with. But you went into this world helping some of the most violent individuals with their mental health issues. Like, let's dive into that. Like, how did you find yourself working with inmates and not just run of the mill everyday, just shoplifters or, guys that ran a red light? These are hardened criminals.
Well, so, it was one of those, I've lived a very I move intuitively. So I don't really have a plan with my life. Like I have an idea, But the,
Yeah.
that's kind of like the way life is. Like you kind of have an idea of what you want to do, but that's just not always how it works out. So I don't have the same element of fear that a lot of people have. Um, Safe to say, I also come from, I think me traveling the world and that kind of comes, it kind of goes into that as well. Like at a young age, like I didn't have that fear factor. Like I was
Hmm.
like, yeah, I'll get on a plane and go to Singapore by myself. I don't give a shit. And so it was exciting to me. I got the opportunity. I saw that there was a job opening and I just applied.
Yeah.
I had no experience with that population. I ended up getting the job. I ended up going to, the first interview I did great. Second interview did great. Third interview, they offered me the job. And I was like, yes, this is so cool. Like, and all my friends were like, no, Jen, you have children that need you. Like, don't do this. And I'm just so like excited about it because for me, clinically, it's like the coolest opportunity ever.
Yeah.
Um, and if you know my background, like my grandfather was in prison. I did a genogram in one of my classes, one of my family counseling classes where we all had to do like this genogram where we look at our family tree and then we look at, um, traits and behaviors and similarities that are passed on from generation to generation, like systemically. Some are biological and, anyways, I was like, wow, my grandfather was in prison. My father was, you know, on the run most of my life and absent and, you know,
Yeah.
not, the paradigm of integrity at that point. My grandfather was shot and killed with a shotgun in a trailer park right in front of my dad.
Oh.
My great grandfather was shot and killed at a taxi stand. My great uncle was beaten to death in a hotel room in Santa Barbara. Like, it's kind of like hanging out with that one side of my family. Like I'm just like, I'm comfortable there. So that's just the one side of my
There's a lot of
family.
trauma on this side of the tree.
Yeah. Like I feel, but I'm good. Like I feel like I can handle this. Thank God for my mom's side. So I remember going and I was nervous. I'm not going to lie. I was
Yeah.
nervous, but I was excited. So I remember I remember driving to the prison and just seeing the barbed wire and going in the front and like it was tough, man. These people are
It's
tough.
it's so funny if you're not watching this on YouTube and you're just listening. It's like when you describe it, you're smiling and you're just so happy, like the barbed wire and the grime and the
Yeah.
screams.
Yeah. So I remember getting there, getting a checkpoint, and then, it's it's a super max security facility that houses
Damn.
everybody in the state that's on death row. And we have the most violent and high profile criminals in the state. Um, and I felt like what an honor to be there. And so my
Mm.
job was to everybody in prison, everybody that's incarcerated, they have rights. They have
Yeah.
medical rights. It's their constitutional right. Um, if they need, medical care, if they need dental, vision, and mental health care, it is their God-given right. It does not matter if they're incarcerated. So we had like a little, kind of like an emergency room type setup where we did have like our medical offices, our nurse practitioner, we had MDs, we had them like right here on this side of the building. And then like as you kind of go down the hall, there's our mental health group. We had a psychiatric nurse practitioner, a psychiatrist, me, our clinical director who is a veteran psychologist that had been working with that population his entire career. Just the most brilliant people, honestly. And yeah, I'll get to that in a minute, but these people were just, they're an absolute joy to work with.
Yeah.
We had an old school LADAC that worked there. Um, And then we have nurses, and then you have your dentist and your eye doctor and physical therapy and all that. So, and we're all there together. And then you have your units, you have your low side guys, which this was new to me. I was assuming, oh, they're medium security. They're able to walk around freely on, on the campus and or on the yard. And but it doesn't mean they're not in there for, you know, beating somebody to death or raping them. Like they still have the propensity to be quite violent, but they're behaving on the yard, so they get more freedom. So you learn situational awareness real quick. You don't let people come up behind you. You are constantly watching the room. What shoes is everybody wearing? If everybody's wearing boots, you probably don't need to be in there. There's some shit that's about to pop off. You just,
Yeah.
you learn to read the room, and trust the vibe and trust your instinct. But for the most part, these guys were fine. I see, there was a couple times I did not feel comfortable. One time I was on a unit and um, I was abandoned by the officer on the unit, and the unit was kind of overtaken by all the inmates, and it was just me and them, and I was in the security office, and there was about 20 of them there all around me, and it was fine. I did not feel like they weren't going to hurt me. Most of those guys in there, I'm the best. Like coming to see me or the nurses or the doctors is like they're it's total reprieve for them.
Yeah.
They are around dudes all day. 99% of them are in gangs. I mean, they see people get stabbed. They deal with horrible shit all day. So they're not going to hurt me. I'm the best thing that's happened to them. Like
Yeah.
they can't wait to come see me. And most of those guys they're not bad dudes. They were in shitty situations. They're a product of their environment.
Yeah.
They made decisions and they got caught for it. A lot of people do things that they don't get caught for. A lot of people think about killing somebody. They did it. Um,
Yeah.
Most of them are roughneck men. A lot of them came from, really traumatic backgrounds. They had terrible childhoods. It really does start at home. One thing that most of them had in common, and I told you this when we talked before, was their adverse childhood experiences. And I'm not talking about just like, their mommy was mean
No,
and,
no.
took away their PlayStation. Like they were severely neglected, abused, abandoned in the most horrific ways. A lot of them are recruited and taken in and groomed by gangs at 7, 8 years old because they have no family and they're taking care of their 3-year-old brother. And the gangs kind of provide for them, and they get, that's how they groom them at a young age and get them in and get them, caught up in that lifestyle. And they're not in there because it's their first offense. Like they've been
Yeah.
doing this since they were kids. Um, some of them, were like the guys on death row, the guys on Supermax. They're in shackles when they talk to me, but everybody else, it's just me and them in a room, just like I would talk to anybody else.
Yeah. And I gotta wonder, and what's it like sitting there with some of the more violent, like the guys on death row? Like how is it being able to work with someone to give them some sort of like support when they know and like eventually like this person is still looking down the barrel of an execution? Like how is it possible to give them resources and tips to like overcome any of the challenges they're going through?
So at that point, and here's another thing, and I want to highlight this, like when you work with that population, like we're there not to necessarily reform. We are there to maintain
Yeah.
control. If we've got a guy that's losing his shit and he's disturbing, he's a big he's disturbing the peace on the unit. Well, we don't know why he doesn't, like, we don't know what's going on with him. He may have just found out that his brother was shot and killed
Yeah.
and he's losing his shit. and he's trying to kill somebody now, so when that happens, there's a lot of crisis intervention. There's a lot. So we don't do, it's a traumatic environment for them. They're living in a fight or flight state most
Yeah.
of the time in that environment. So the guys on death row, they're different. I mean, I think it's case to case. Some of them have made peace with God.
Yeah.
Some of them, you have to think they're in isolation 23 hours a day, and they have been for years. And to like that alone changes a person. Like that alone is like that will break a man's spirit.
Yeah.
Um,
It's got to
for
be extremely difficult to try to connect with somebody and provide any sort of like support when they've been isolated for so long.
At that point, death is something they look forward to.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
that's like the only thing they have to look at, like ending that sort of like day in, day out.
mhm.
Like, and I have to imagine though, it's got to be, how do you walk away from the office work to go back home? Because I can only imagine that some days are heavier than most. Like it can't, I mean, at some point it does feel like a normal 9 to 5, of course, for you, but I would imagine there's got to be some days that are just hit a little different.
It's so funny that you say that because every day, in a Supermax prison, like there's never a dull moment. It's like, okay, who got stabbed today? And
Yeah.
it's like whenever we do group, it's so fun. I love doing group there because these guys are brilliant. They are smart. I mean, we could do trivia and they smoke me. And like the psych, one time
Yeah.
it was me and the psychiatrist doing trivia for fun, and these guys were just smoking our asses. They were so smart. Um, so that I saw that actually was very challenging, and it's still challenging to separate because when I leave, I have an hour drive home,
Mhm.
hour and a half. And so that hour and a half drive is good for me because I can decompress.
Yeah.
And I found that I have to. It's not like I can just talk about work with, you know, my friends. I can't. Like that. I'm like, yeah, I worked with a guy today that chopped up 8 people with a hatchet. And like people just look at you like, what? Like, are
Fuck.
you like, what the fuck? That's just a normal day for me. Um, Yeah, you just can't talk about it really with everybody. So you compartmentalize a lot. Um, and you're in a state of fight or flight when you're there. I'm always kind of looking over my shoulder and I'm on high alert. And I'm not just on high alert there. I'm on high alert when I leave because I
Mm.
work with really high ranking gang members. I work with some of the highest ranking gang members in the state and the country. And they find out everything. They find
Oh
out where
yeah.
you live. Oh, they know where I live. They know my middle name. Like I had guys come up to me and be like, "So your middle name's Denise?" And I'm just like looking at them like, "Okay." So, they will try um they have nothing but time.
Yeah.
And they all have guys on the outside working on the outside. So I always, I have to make sure nobody's following me home or you kind of maintain that level of high alert even when you're not there, because you are still working with a very dangerous population. It is not for the faint of heart. It is a very serious job. It is a dangerous job. Um, so you have to keep that in mind. These guys are very, very manipulative, very manipulative. They will find a way to get to you. Um, so you kind of always have to be keeping yourself in check too. But I learned when I get home, I don't want to talk about work. I don't want to think about work. I leave it at work. When I
Yeah.
when I drive off um, the property, I leave it there. Um, and I mean, it's necessary. I
Yeah.
also have to go to therapy.
I
Therapists
was
need
just gonna
therapists.
ask. I was just gonna ask because like a lot of people have this assumption that if you're a mental health professional, like you've got it all taken care of. It's like, no, dude, like these people do so much for you. And talking, whether you're a veteran, first responder, like your therapists are there to support you. They do a great job to help you, but they're also taking in all of that baggage, all those stories, all that information. They have to get help themselves. Like
Absolutely.
all professionals will tell you, like, yeah, I have my own therapist.
I mean, first responders, like they have, I mean, people that work in an ER, they
Yeah,
see people die every day. They see like, kids come in getting rape kits. Like I mean, we need to be so thankful for our first responders and our police officers, our correctional officers. They literally risk their lives every
yeah,
single day. They see trauma every day.
yeah,
So, uh, yeah, maintaining my own mental health is the top priority because if I'm not okay, I can't help other people. And we kind of keep each other in check too. Like when you're working at this level, when you're a therapist, we have to be mindful of, we have lives. We might
yeah,
be going through a divorce. We might be, facing our own demons. And if we ever feel like that might interfere with our ability to do our job, we have to um, reach out to our peers, and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I need you to sit in on this session with me.
yeah,
And, or I'm going through a divorce and I'm working with a guy that's, cheated on his wife. And I need to make sure I don't, you have to be mindful of transference and counter transference and,
mm,
make sure that you're operating, you know, objectively. And that's another thing I wanted to get into. Like, with professional licensure, like that is so important for
yeah,
anybody that's wanting to get a therapist and wanting to get mental health care. Ask questions and ask like what your license is. Like what is your specialty? Do you have a focus? Um, what is your license? Where did you go to school? Ask about education because there are a lot of people out there that do not have any business practicing. And when you don't have that professional body like the American Psychological Association and the American Counseling Association to keep you in check, you could really hurt somebody.
yeah.
If you don't know what you're doing, you could really hurt somebody.
There's a lot of grifters out there, come to find out. There's a market. People are finding themselves being able to label themselves a healer in the space. So be
Mhm.
willing. If you're listening, like make sure you're going through the right person. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to look up at their wall and see their degrees. It's one thing I realized, like, if look at the names of the universities, of the institutions this person graduated from. If it's a school in Costa Rica or another another country, like maybe ask some further questions and clarify.
Yeah. Are you a life coach and did it take 20 minutes to get the certification online? Like what? Yeah.
It took 3 weeks. Thank you very much.
So, but yeah, you got to know that you're working with somebody who's competent and
Yeah,
practicing within that scope of competence. And with mental health, there is not. It's a case by case thing, and with
yeah,
trauma, especially, trauma is it's unique to the individual. There's I think sometimes whenever we talk about trauma, it almost feels like the playing field's been level, and PTSD is just this is what it is, and this is what
yeah,
it looks like for everybody, and this is how it manifests pathologically, and that's not the case. I also work in foster care, and all my kiddos have a significant amount of trauma,
yeah,
and
man.
whenever you do an assessment on anybody, you know you take a multi-dimensional assessment, and you're looking at everything before you want to um, input like a behavioral change. You want to look at the bigger picture. You have to know what to do and how to collect data and how to make sound clinical judgment on how to you know proceed with their treatment and their level of care. if you have a person that says they have PTSD and they have trauma and you assess them and they had, one incident that was highly traumatic, they had an adverse reaction to it and they're kind of, and it's causing, um, significant problems in their life, then, that's a different level of care than somebody who was sexually abused when they were 3, 4, 5 years old repeatedly by a family member for years. Trauma essentially is when it's when we experience something so malevolent that our perception of reality becomes fragmented, and it can be quite severe. It can manifest and turn into borderline personality disorder. It can turn into schizophrenia. It can be quite complex to knit back together and help that person knit back together, um, their reality that was so distorted and destroyed. And I've worked with people all over the world before I got into people who are incarcerated in foster care. For a couple of years, I was working an online platform, and I was working with people around the world, which was wonderful. Because as a clinician, you really see how multiculturalism plays into mental health care and how people from Thailand view, taking a knee and reaching out for help and talking about things that are not, they have issues in their culture that we don't necessarily have issues with in our culture. And everybody
Really?
looks at mental health, of course, absolutely. Um,
What are some of the differences that you picked out and seen?
so, well, for example, in male dominated cultures, I was working with someone from Serbia. She was in what we would consider here as an abusive relationship. In that culture, it is male dominated. They have a different view on their values are different. Their
Yeah.
beliefs are different. So we have to take that into consideration when we work with people. We have to understand, we cater our treatment to what they value and what they believe. And um, we do not project our own values and beliefs onto them. It has to align with what's unique to them.
Yeah.
So that's just an example. She was very dependent. He was very abrasive. He was like the leader of the house. He was very controlling, but in that culture, that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Things that we would consider child abuse in other countries it's pretty common. To me, it's still abuse, something I would classify as abusive. But you have to be real careful to do your research on whoever you're working with and look at their culture. Like if you're
Yeah.
working, I've worked with all kinds of high performers. I've worked with judges, lawyers, microbiologists from Pakistan. I've worked with people from UAE, Jordan, Japan.
I would
Um,
imagine the guys from Pakistan and Jordan would be very difficult.
it was an it was interesting. Um, but to be able to reach them is it's just the reward. There's nothing like it. When you're
Yeah.
able to, you may not have anything in common with this person, you know, and you may not think they're just you hit like you have this moment. It's like this eureka moment, and you're like, oh, that's it. That's where we connect.
Yeah.
And then that is priceless. And then you see them start to heal, and you see treatment become effective, and there's nothing like it. I've noticed in America, a lot of people are so entitled. I don't think I'm the
Nope.
first person to pick up on that. A lot of people, I found that my clients in the US were they were rude to me. If I was a few minutes late, they would just be furious at me.
Really?
And tell me how incompetent and terrible I was. But
They should try the VA.
people in other countries were so kind and so respectful.
Yeah.
And so there's some differences there. And
That's crazy. I and your work both with the foster care system and then with our supermax population, it's almost like you can see the linkage probably between like the ACEs, the adversity a child goes through early on in their development, and how it will lead and affect and potentially lead them down that path. Like in your experience, like what are some things that we can do? Like what are some things we should be doing in order to help? Because we always think about the stick. We always think about more penalties, more rigorous prison times, but we often don't even look at the services or things that we could do to help mitigate that problem. Like it starts at a young age. It starts when they're children. And in my own experience, one of the things that I've realized is like, man, like if we don't have a family, if we don't have fathers at home, like that value raising their kids, that's one thing. That's just one thing that could help stem this constant flow of people going into the prison system. What are some things that you've seen that you're like, shit, like we should be talking about this? This could help alleviate the problem.
That's a really good question. I also just signed on to work with Louisville, Metro Louisville,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the jail population is quite different than the prison population. You have to think jail is a revolving door.
Yeah.
You know, you get there, you can leave. Prison, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Like it's a whole different, in that sense, it's quite different. And in jail, there's actually there are so many sick people who are in jail who are just, they need, and that's why they have a behavioral health unit in jail, because there's so many people there that don't need to be there. So I signed on to work the forensic unit, with people who've been deemed incompetent to stand trial, to work with these people to get them to a working level of competency so that they can proceed with their case and move forward and get out of there. Um, and then also, it's not like we can just Baker Act them and then, send them out for an assessment at a state hospital, because the state hospitals, there's no vacancies. They cannot do it. So they have their own little behavioral health center there in the jail. And, as far as, yes, there is absolutely a correlation of, foster care. Like I said, it starts at home. People are so resilient. Um, and I've learned so much from working with my kids. Like, oh my gosh, like these kids are so brave and so tough. And you talk about trauma. I mean, we take kids that are where I am the treatment director for um, a therapeutic foster care agency. And so we have the kids that are higher levels of care.
Mhm.
And so um, they typically have a lot more problems. There's a difference in a kid that's in foster care because their parent was truant and they didn't go to school, and a kid that was, you know, we see the most severe cases, the worst of the worst. And if you really want to help, the foster care system they need so much help. We don't realize, there's 500,000 kids a year go through the foster care system, and they bounce from house to house to house. I see it every day. Um, and that in itself is traumatic. And then you have you know, the reason they came into foster care in the first place, and the experiences they had before they came to us. And it is as complex as it gets. And what they need is a safe home, a kind home, a loving home. They need love. They need somebody that will not abandon them, that will be consistent and committed and dedicated and protect them. These kids have nobody, but they are so good. And they are wonderful. They really are. And it's amazing how a kid's life can turn around. And I've seen it when they get into a home that is loving and kind, like that. It, it turns this child into a different little human being. Um, And we work with all ages. And so what we need are homes. We need good homes with good people. And a lot of people talk about the issue. Oh, it's a problem. Oh, they want to help. They just don't know how to help. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You have to get over yourself and you have to step up and offer your services. Open your home
Yeah.
up. If you want to make a difference, that's what you have to do. You cannot turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to the most vulnerable citizens in this country. Children have rights. So we
Yeah.
kind of just think, oh, somebody else is taking care of it. They're not.
That's unfortunately what a vast majority of the population thinks, and it's heartbreaking because a baby that gets put in the foster care system has a higher chance of getting adopted instantly. Is everybody, unfortunately there's a lot of couples out there that can't conceive or having difficulty, so a baby looks and it seems like the best option. What they don't stop to think about is the 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old that also needs a home. And I understand everybody wants to have that experience of like bringing a baby home, but it's like, man, like we've got tons of kids, young kids that are going to be extremely vulnerable and susceptible to later on in life, maybe follow that path that will lead them into the system unless people step up and are willing to take them in and give them a home, because that's honestly one of the things that you will read, whether you've read The Deepest Well or read Bessel van der Kolk's Body Keeps the Score. Like, as a child, you need those parents, the people that can show you love and affection and take care of you and provide you with the guidance and counseling of how to be an adult, how to go about being a good person. And when we look at what you're doing with foster cares, it's just beyond admirable. Like, we need more people involved that can help them. And it's just heartbreaking to see how many children need good families. Like, the numbers are, if you look at the stats, it's downright depressing. It will break your heart looking at how many American kids go without a parent, go without somebody that can take care of them and provide them a loving, safe, secure home.
It'll change your life. If you see it, if you actually step up to that line and you know, you see it for yourself, it will change you. It will break your heart every single day. But you can't just and that's with me, it's like I'm involved now.
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not leaving these kids. I've dedicated myself to them. Like, they are so precious. It's their right to be loved. It's their right to have a good, safe home. It's their right to have good nutrition and good food and everything it's their God-given right. And so, um, yeah, yeah, it's a heavy subject. Um, but if you want to help and you can help, that would be a great way. Just open your home up, do some training, Google it. There are so many agencies. Mine is Heritage Foster Care, and we work the entire state of Kentucky. And we have kids from all over. We just took 8 siblings from the Middle
Wow.
East,
Wow.
and
Holy
we
cow.
and we don't know like how they got here. Some of them don't speak
Oh,
English.
golly.
Their caregiver was arrested for human trafficking in Texas, and they were in
God.
Kentucky. They were taken to Texas. I don't really know I know it's under, I can't talk too much about it, but that is something that we also deal with is the border crisis and
Yeah.
human trafficking. And it affects us here in Kentucky. It's not just you
Jen,
know,
like that is something that is people are so, I mean, we are days away from the election and people are still trying to deny that human trafficking is an issue. And let me tell you, it's been an issue in this country. It has grown exponentially. When people refuse to understand the complexity of the problem, you just outlined just one incident. 8 siblings
mhm.
trafficked from the Middle East Jen, what are some other things you're seeing there? And in Kentucky, which people tend to think that the problem is like San Antonio, Texas, it stays there. No, this is going out throughout the entirety of the United States.
So let me be clear. They lived in Kentucky. They were taken to Texas to be sold
No
across the
way.
border.
No.
So yeah, I mean, they have, yeah, and we don't know, like I said, they're ages 1 to 13. Um, we don't really have good documentation. Three of them, it says they were born on January 1st. That's like, they could have come up with something a little more creative. Um, they don't have proper documentation. It is heartbreaking. Um, that is just one case. That is our most recent case. We have kids that are, trafficked by their parents for drugs. They're sold for sex, so that their parents can buy drugs. They have, we deal with a lot of human trafficking cases that are, um, local. It happens in our backyards. But yeah, as far as the border, if you can't comprehend it, then you need to actually step up and work the front line and get a good hard look at
Yeah.
it yourself. And then at that point, you cannot deny it.
Yeah, everybody attaches themselves to the heartwarming story of an immigrant family coming over the border seeking asylum, and that's not the whole picture. That's a very
No.
small portion of the picture.
And to make this even more eye-opening for me was these kids were indoctrinated and taught that we were evil, that white people were evil. The littles, I'm talking, they would fight, they fought, they cussed us. They were taught that we were the enemy. They didn't come over here seeking asylum.
that I mean, there it is. Like
There
if
it
you're
is.
looking for any more truth to what's really going on, like this is just one of thousands and thousands of stories out there. Like,
Absolutely. It's horrific. It is horrific. And if you just see like one case is enough. Like in science, like in psychology, like if the degree of error is too broad, like we can't,
mhm.
there's no validity. We can't do it. Like it's too dangerous. This is so dangerous. Like, why would we, like, I don't understand. I am dumbfounded by just the blatant denial of our politicians on, like, there's mountains of evidence that
Yeah,
shows like this is dangerous. We should never have done this. The degree of error is there. Like there's too many things that are happening that are not good to make it worth it. It's not worth it.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's a problem. And I want everybody to think about that. And with foster care, we get all those kiddos all those kiddos that come over here across the border when they're people that brought them or deported or abandoned them, they end up in our agencies. That's, we get them all.
And that's best
So,
case scenario. That's the thing to realize. That's the best case scenario. These kids are found. They are brought to a place where there are people that care and can provide food, supplies, and love, and truly try to care for them. That's best case. The
that is
worst
the
case
best case.
scenario is what's happening that none of us know about, or we pretend we don't know what's going on, and they're being brought into a hellish existence. And I don't want to continue living in a world like that. I don't want this to continue being the everyday norm. Like, we have to have some sort of awakening to realize, like, okay, we need to actually like go to where the source and fix this problem. Like,
Yeah, I mean, we're highlighting like the best possible outcome for these kids, but you go down, it gets darker and darker and
yep,
darker. Human trafficking is not just sex trade, it's not just, free labor, it's organ harvesting. It
yep,
is, they may sell somebody into the sex trade at a young age from the time they're born. And then They may get murdered in the process, but they're going to put those organs on ice, and it doesn't just stop there. It's a very dark, very evil
Yeah.
truth that's happening that we all need to we need to accept it, and we need to do whatever we can to prevent it.
Yeah.
So closing the borders, making it tighter to come in, like you said, and like I said, you'd be a fool to think that it's not a problem at this point. There's too much evidence that suggests otherwise.
No. But Jen, I can't thank you enough for being here. I do want to end it. We were talking about one of the most tragic and most heartbreaking aspects of our current life right now in the United States. But to take it back to something positive, you're also part of our community because you're a military spouse. And I just want to say thank you for coming on and being vulnerable enough to share your entire story, but for also being part of our community because you're married to, you're one of us. You're married to one of our Green Beret brothers. And I just want to say, I know it's not easy. It's probably one of the hardest things you have to do coming from work and then having to deal with our Green Beret madness. But thank you for what you're doing on all fronts. And we have to connect. So I have some information to pass off for your husband because he's coming close to retirement, right?
Yes, Jason Ridings, ladies and gentlemen. He's coming up on retirement at 29 years, and he wanted to stay. He wanted to stay, but they would not let him stay past mandatory retirement. And I'm honored to be his wife. He is my hero. And I tell him, like, if I could be anybody besides myself, I would be Jason Ridings. He is the best. But you're too kind. Thank you for your kind words. He's very supportive of my career, and yeah, we're excited about it. I know it's happening in real time for us and for him. So it's wild talking about it because it's really like it's happening, right now. And he's had an entire life of this.
Oh yeah.
He came in as a Marine for a few years, and then he became a Green Beret. He was with 3rd Special Forces Group. Then he was with SWIC for a while as an instructor at Range 37, and then he came to 5th Group. And so it'll be a huge change. So I would love to get some information, some resources from you. That would be great.
That's what we're all about, and I got you. Everybody goes through transition. We all have to leave the world of Peter Pan and the Lost Boys at some point. We all have to. And it's going to be even better for him on the outside. He's going to have an amazing chapter 2 because he's got an amazing warrior right next to him who's going to keep his ass in check because that's what we need. It's not going to be easy. Some days are not going to be pretty because you have to remember this has been his entire life. So it does have some elements of grief. It does have some elements of feeling like you don't have any purpose, but I mean, he's got the best partner to get him through this, and Security Halt will definitely be throwing some resources your way to help him transition and find his next best chapter when he finally puts his boots up and retires him for good. But yeah, it's awesome to see that there's those guys that stick around. Like everybody has to go through it. We have to all eventually go through that final test, and that's going on through the outside. But like I said, he's going to be great, and it's going to be an amazing chapter for him. So,
thank you. I love the positivity.
Yeah. It doesn't have to, there's this whole camp where it's like, it's the best. And I forget who it was. They posted this video of like this firefight from a movie. It's like, that's what I wanted my career to end. And I'm like, no, fuck no. There's so many better things after you served in the military. Like, stop trying to glamorize staying in till you're, 75 years old. There's a better life out there, and life really does get better once you find out that next chapter. Because let me tell you, you were a person of service your entire military career. When you get on the outside, you're an even more powerful person of service. You can advocate for your brothers and sisters. You can advocate for people in other groups that need support. You can work in prisons and help change the mental health culture within there. Or you can get involved with foster care, like Dr. Jen Cooley right here. Like, you can do so many different things. And here's the great part. Nobody's telling you what to do. It's all about you, what you want to do. If you want to freaking just go fishing and hunting and start an outdoor guide company, you can literally do that. But it's just
I
great
love
having
that.
that ability. So I know he's going to land on his feet. I know he's going to find something amazing for this next chapter. And I can't wait for you guys to come back on the show to talk about it, because I know you guys are going to be a powerful couple and a powerful force for good on the outside. So thank you so much for being here. If
Thank you
people
for
want to
having
get
me.
involved, absolutely. If people want to donate or bring any sort of resources to bear to help your foster care little ones, where can they go to find out more information?
So you can reach out to me personally. Actually, we have things going on all the time. We need sponsors for Christmas for our kiddos. Um, and a lot of guys, I've already got people in our community, in your community, that have signed up to help sponsor these kids for Christmas. So you can reach out to me personally. Um, my Instagram is Drinks with Jen.
Put
It's
that in the episode description, and then
yeah,
right here you'll see it pop up. Video
yeah,
editor's going
and
to love that.
yeah, and then also if you wanted to just look at my agency, Heritage Foster Care, and don't just stop there. Like we're in the state of Kentucky, but just look and see who's in your community, and um, and they would be so thankful. Like they need all the help they can get. There's so many foster homes outside of the state, like
Yeah.
outside of DCS or DCBS. Like there's a lot of private foster care agencies that take the runoff because the state is, they're inundated with so many kids. So
Yep.
that's why you have these private agencies that open up to take, to help them and to, take those kids, like you said, that do need a higher level of care, that are older, that might be teenagers, that aren't, they've had a hard time for whatever reason finding permanent placement. So look in your local community, do Google search it, call your local sheriff's department, call the Department of Human Services, the Department of Child Services, and just start there.
Absolutely. Jen, thank you so much for being here. Cannot wait to have you guys back on. To all y'all tuning in, thank you for being here. Thank you for checking us out, and we'll see you all next time. Till then, take care.